I also do want to thank one of our alumni, Mr. Anthony Stanowski. He's an MBA alum from our healthcare management program, for helping introduce us, Widener University, to Mr. Studer. Today, we have a very rare opportunity to hear from a leader who has made an impact on several industries, from healthcare to economic development and to the sports industry. Quint Studer has spent decades in healthcare. He has worked for multiple healthcare systems, the last stop being as president of Baptist Hospital in Pensacola, Florida. Quint founded the Studer Community Institute, a not-for-profit whose mission is to improve the quality of life for people. He also co-owns two minor league baseball teams, the Pensacola Blue Wahoos and the Beloit Skycarp. He's authored many books, which are listed on bestseller lists all over the country. He serves on healthcare boards and is a frequent speaker, workshop facilitator, and mentor to individuals and organizations. The tools and techniques Quint has created over the years are now staples in healthcare systems throughout the world. His newest book, The Calling: Why Healthcare is So Special, is aimed at helping healthcare professionals keep their sense of passion and purpose high. I've been fortunate to be able to speak with Quint several times, and what has struck me most in my conversations with Quint is that his focus on people as the biggest asset in any organization is really unique. And whether those organizations are in healthcare, economic development, or sports, his focus always is on people. And I think you'll hear that from him today. I would describe his leadership style as being authentic servant leadership focused. And I find it to be both inspirational and educational. Mr. Studer has prepared his talk today using the questions that many of you in the audience provided when you registered. For those students who are on campus here at Widener, Mr. Studer has generously provided several copies of some of his books. We have those in the dean's office, and we are looking forward to handing those books out to the students who've been inspired by Quint's talk today. Mr. Studer, it is definitely an honor and a privilege to hear from you today, and I thank you for taking your time to speak with us in the Widener community.
Well, thank you. Thank you to Anthony Stankowski for being a very loyal alumnus of your university. It's nice to be here. Jack, John, Sam, Yvonne, nice having you here. Jeff, thank you for putting your cameras on. Hope you have a little lopsided sense of humor, because then you'll understand what I'm going to say most of this, the next 50 minutes or so. So it's nice to have you here. The questions I got were divided into categories. There's some general questions that I'll answer. There's a number of leadership questions that I'll address. There's a community development question. I wrote a book called Building Vibrant Communities, and if it's exactly written for places like Chester. It was written for small and mid-market communities that have lost their talent over the years. They usually struggle with gaining population and so on, and they lose talent. So I got involved in Pensacola, Florida about 15 years ago in making our community better. And it's worked. We're now one of the 10 top places downtown. We have a vibrant downtown. We're the 17th best place in the country to be an entrepreneur. And this is a community that was just flat for years. So I wrote a book on that. And then, so I'm going to talk a little bit about community development. And then I'm going to, of course, address some healthcare, which I spent a lot of time in. So the first questions are general. And again, you're welcome to put anything you'd like in chat. As an author yourself, what piece of advice could you give someone aspiring to write a book in their field? You know, it's pretty cool. I think I've got 11 books out, and it's pretty neat because they normally do pretty well. In fact, Hardwiring Excellence has done over 1.8 million copies. So that sort of puts things into perspective, and some don't do as well. But I wrote my first book when I was probably, let me see, in my early 50s. And I think I do have a good system to do it, because I get asked this question quite a bit. For me, this is my style. I sort of try out a lot of what I'm going to write before I ever write it. You know, I'm lucky enough to give talks. So for example, right now I have a big talk coming up next week on change, and it's not even in any of my books, but I'll pilot it out. I've written a lot lately on mental health, which I turned into a small book. And then I'm speaking on human ecology, the human ecosystem in any organization. So what I'll do is maybe for 6 months to a year, I'll actually be utilizing the material I'm going to put into a book before I ever put it into a book to sort of see how it folds and how it does. Then what I do, I sort of outline the major themes of the book. So example, in my book, The Great Employee Handbook was pretty simple. I said, what are some tips to get along with your boss? What are some tips to get along with your coworkers? What are some tips to provide great customer service? So I had 3 boxes. I think the secret for me is I pick a chapter that I feel strongest about, and I write that chapter. So example, in the book Results at Last, I think, which made number 5 or 6 on the Wall Street Journal's bestseller list, I started out on chapter 5, and that's called What's the What? And it was the key to learning anything is figure out what a person's what is. So in relationships, it's what's important to them. So I started out with chapter 5. And sometimes I don't even write them in the sequence, but I pick a chapter I feel best about. Now, one of the number one questions I've gotten over the years in workshops, because I talk about dealing with underperforming in workers or employees or leaders, is what if your boss is the real problem? So I actually wrote a chapter called What If Your Boss is the Problem? Now, I will tell you, I didn't put that near the front of the book because I knew if a CEO read it and saw that chapter, they might not buy it for the rest of their employees. I buried it a little bit further in the book. So when I write a book, I basically pick chapters and I write the chapters individually that I feel best about. That means I'll repeat a question or a story. I might put a story in 5 chapters, the same story. And then when I go to edit the book, I'll pick where does the story actually fit the best in. And it's been a pretty effective way to write a book. So if any of you'd like to go further, my email is quint@quintstuder.com. Be glad to help you. I also know a lot of resources out there from publishers. In fact, I got a note the other day from a publisher in Nashville saying, would you want to write a book on this topic? I also know good editors and that. So anything I can do to help. So that's how to write a book. Next is, what's your biggest accomplishment? I think it's sobriety. December 24th of 1982, I woke up suicidal. I had lost families. I'd lost money, and I was hanging on by a thread on a job. I basically ended up having one of those aha moments that I'm the problem, not everyone else is the problem. So I'm just finished my 39th year of sobriety. I'm very involved in recovery. I'm still very involved in it. At 12:15, I have a little session on it. The day after this, I'm Central Time. That's my greatest accomplishment. And I don't really think it's an accomplishment in essence, because I've done very little, but just became compliant. So I think my greatest accomplishment was becoming teachable, becoming compliant. And, it's interesting because in my new work on change, I have a formula for change, which I love Cotter, I love Heath Brothers, but I've made it real simple on change. There's 3 components of change. The first one is defiance. Most people, when being asked to change, have a little bit of defiance in them. I mean, think about it. When you put a new software system in, does everybody go great? We've been just dying for a new software system or a new process. Most people, or many people, start off with being defiant. Particularly remember, if you're in fields with scientists who are skeptical, there's going to be defiance. And I think I had to learn not to take defiance personally, but just realize it's natural human behavior. So what's the real secret of moving change? It's compliance. In fact, I have an article that runs in some newspapers. You can actually get it online every Wednesday, I think. And my article coming up Sunday is compliance. How does a leader get people to be compliant? Because that's really what leadership is, because we want people to follow a treatment plan. So for example, if I go to the doctor and the doctor diagnoses me, they'll give me a treatment plan. And my outcomes will be very dependent on my compliance. If I'm in a class at the university the faculty member is going to give me the best approach possible to learn. So how do I become compliant and follow direction? And I became compliant December of 1982, and I've been pretty compliant in many ways ever since. Now, it doesn't mean I don't want to be defiant, but I moved to compliance. So the key to any leadership is how to get followers, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Now, if I get compliance and I'm giving them the best practice, I wrote a book that I think hit 6 on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, somewhere in there, called Busy Leader Handbook. And basically it's best practices. Because really as a leader, what I'm trying to implement is best practices. So how do I get people to adjust to best practices? You would think they would, but they really don't. I wrote a book called Straight A Leadership on why people don't implement best practices. There's some psychological reasons: fear of failure, want to relate, not to compare, we're unique, we're different, you don't understand, or so on. So I think if I can get compliance, which means I get repetitive behavior. And how do we get good at something? We do it often, all the time. And if I do it often, all the time, then I become reliant on it. So if you're writing a formula down, it's defiance, compliance, reliance. I recently presented this to a number of physicians and non-physicians at Valley Healthcare in Ridgewood, New Jersey. And it was interesting because afterwards the CEO said, anybody want to comment on Quint's talk? And the chief medical officer said, I normally don't take notes to these types of talks, but I took notes on defiance, compliance, and reliance. So I became compliant. Now I'm reliant on a certain way to live. So that's my greatest accomplishment. How has analytics played a role in your industry? I am big into analytics, but not too many analytics. I've never been a big fan of Duke's spiderweb stuff because I thought it had way too many things on it. So the analytics are going to adjust to what you're looking at right now. So let me give you some new analytics that I've been presenting, which I think are relatively unusual. So if I'm running an organization today, I'm asking my insurance company, how much money are we spending on medication for depression and anxiety? I will guarantee you most CEOs aren't on top of that number right now. Now, I'm not saying that was a number we looked at 10 years ago, but I think it's a number we look at today. That tells me what's going on in the culture of the organization. Now, I'm not asking for specific names. I'm not asking for anything, but I want my benefit plan to let me know what's going on. The number 1 or 2 biggest cost in an insurance plan today as an employer is for antidepressants. Now, if I'm spending money, if I'm in an organization and I'm having a lot of falls, I'm all over falls. If my accounts receivable are way behind, I'm spending thousands and thousands of dollars on revenue cycle consulting. So I think picking the right analytics is vital. The second analytic I look at is how much utilization are we getting for our resources? Most businesses today do a pretty good job providing resources for well-being. They offer wellness programs, they offer employee assistance programs. We offer a lot of things. So the issue is not the offering, the issue is the utilization. So I just did a large webinar, national, it's out of London, with people that work for giant companies, Vans, all those. And everybody brags about the resources they're offering, but it doesn't do any good if there's no utilization of those resources. So I look at analytics all the time. So for example, recently working, and Anthony knows this, with Airmark, which is a company I love, and they offer a lot of services in healthcare. They offer food and environmental services. Now, one of the challenges we're all having is staffing. So you have to look at analytics. If people are leaving, when are they leaving? Are they leaving right off the bat? Is there certain races that are leaving, certain ages that are leaving, certain genders that are leaving? I like analytics, and you have to dig into analytics. Probably what built my company, the Studer Group, which I owned from 2000 to 2015, was the analytics of impact of employee engagement and turnover on deaths. Now, you wouldn't think that. See, for years, they thought maybe this employee turnover was sort of a nice thing. But then when you look at it, there's absolute research that I can share with you that shows the higher turnover in healthcare, the more likely a person is to die. It's called a mortality index. So if I have low turnover, I'm going to save more lives. So all of a sudden, if you're looking at saving lives, the analytic of turnover becomes imperative. So in baseball, we look at key analytics. Our baseball analytics are something called a cap fee. That's how much money does someone you spend once they come into a stadium. So I think analytics are what allows us to diagnose. And the other formula that I will give you, I think you diagnose, then you design, and then you execute. So first you use analytics to diagnose the situation, then you design a solution, and then you execute on that solution. So I think, as you can tell, I'm sort of a measurement type person, and you measure what's important and you pivot at times. And I think what happens interesting, and now this is for healthcare people, almost everybody knows cash days on hand. I can go to executive team and say, how much days cash on hand do you know? Most of them know. Then the question is, do you know how many falls you're having? Do you know how many infections you're having? Do you know how many people are leaving without being treated? Those are key analytics too. So my recent column I wrote 2 weeks ago is when you focus on money, you often lose money. When you focus on people, you can make money. So that's where it starts. And we'll get into that more as we move along. What led you to pursue a diverse career with different passions? Lack of discipline, combined with a lot of creativity. So I've always had a lot of creativity, but I never had money to pursue any of it. And then when my company got sort of successful, I had money to do other things. So I've always been interested in doing things, and sometimes you just fall into it. So there wasn't ever a goal to diversify. It just sort of happened. So we had a struggling minor league baseball team in Pensacola. I sort of liked baseball, so I purchased it. And then once you purchase it, you want it to be successful. And that's what got me into the baseball. But I didn't get into baseball for baseball. Our mission statement of the Pensacola Blue Wahoos and now of the Beloit Sky Carp is to improve the quality of life for people in our community. We don't even talk about baseball. So it's all about quality of life in our community. And so that's why I bought into this. We do many, many things. So that diversified me. Well, then in 2005, Jim Clifton of Gallup contacted me because he said he noticed healthcare systems I work with outperform those I don't work with, and he wanted to study my methods and tools and techniques. As we were meeting, I was doing small talk with him. I asked him, hey, what's Gallup looking at now? He said, well, we're looking at why do some cities thrive and some cities die. And he said, a lot of times people think it's location, and it's not. It's really some key elements that make a thriving community separate. And it was called Soul of the City. And I got the white paper and I started looking at our community. And if you look at the characteristics of Pensacola, we were dying. We had a flat population. We had downtown with boarded up stores. We were dying. And we could use all sorts of excuses, but we were dying. So one of the things he talked about is you got to have a vibrant downtown. So then I went and started doing research. How do you create a vibrant downtown to keep young people in? I ended up going to Pittsburgh and meeting a guy named Ray Gindros, who has a company, Urban Design. And he came to Pensacola and he toured it and he said, you need a great intersection. Every great downtown has a great intersection. And I said, where should our intersection be? And he said, Palafox and Maine. And I said, well, there's just 2 empty buildings and 2 empty lots. But he said, yeah, but that's where it should be. And he gave me reasons. So my wife and I bought the 2 empty buildings and we revitalized them. So that's how my wife got into coffee making and olive oil and things like that. So then you start doing diagnosis. So I'm always one to look at research. My not-for-profit, Studer Community Institute, creates a dashboard. And our dashboard showed kids weren't ready for kindergarten. So then we started wondering, how much does kindergarten readiness impact third grade reading and fourth grade math? I don't know. So we went and found an expert called Dr. Dana Susskind, a physician at the University of Chicago. And like I always do, we brought her to Pensacola, picked her brain, and she said 80 to 85% of the brain is developed by age 3. Then VPK is too late, voluntary pre-kindergarten. So what do? Well, the challenge is, particularly in lower socioeconomic moms, lack of trust and lack of finding. So now at our hospitals for our 4th year, every mom before she leaves the hospital gets a tutorial on how to build her baby's brain. We called it Build a Brain, Build a Life, Build a Community. So I'm into that. And I get into that because I think if you find a problem, you have a human responsibility to find a solution. So if you go to studeri.org, we're doing some really cool stuff. We've had it peer-reviewed research by the University of Chicago, and we've had it peer-reviewed research by Harvard. Both of them say we're turning the dial. So if I go to a community and they want to make it a great community, I tell them you better get moms educated, usually moms, it could be dads, before they leave the hospital on how to build a baby's brain. So those are some of my passions, and the passions all go back to my beginnings as a special education teacher. And that's how I spent the first 10 years of my life, as a special education teacher. Why? I've always had an empathy and a desire to make people's lives better, and I could relate. So I think as a special education professional, the first thing we do is diagnose a child. Then we set lofty goals. We work together with called an M-team, multidisciplinary team. We create a lesson plan or an IEP, an individualized education plan. And then we work together to turn the dial. And so that's what I've done. And it's no different than anything. When I was at a hospital one time, we were named the best hospital in the country. And a guy came up to me and said, I don't understand how a special ed teacher runs a hospital. And I said, well, first thing you do is you diagnose, then you set a goal, you get everybody on the same page, you figure out what skills do people need to achieve that goal. You use a lot of reward and recognition, you throw in some consequences, and that's how you do it. And he looked at me and said, my gosh, I wish I had a degree in special ed right now. So I think all our skills are transferable. They really, really are. What advice would you give students about to graduate from college? Number one, be kind to yourself. There's enough people going to beat you up in life. I was just talking to a friend of mine named Vaughn, and he read one of my columns, and it talks about, do we filter out the positive? And when I was in therapy, I'm saving you guys a lot of therapy money, by the way, right now. When I was in therapy, which I still go to, the therapist said to me, Quint, I notice when I give you a compliment, you deflect it. When I don't give you a compliment, give you some criticism, you actually let it in. And it changed my life. It takes 3 compliments to 1 criticism for someone to feel good about another human being. So let's give all of you a little test. If your supervisor right now, or one of the faculty members at the university right now, texted you and said, hey, can you give me a call this afternoon? Is your first thought, oh, good, here comes some good news. Here comes a compliment. They probably just want to tell me what a good job I'm doing. In fact, if Widener, if you really want to mess up some people, just call facilities and engineering and just tell them temperature's good. Not too hot, not too cold. They've never had a call like that in their life. So we build cultures on criticism. I'm okay with criticism, but you've got to have 3 times as many positives as negative. And I think sometimes we filter out the positive. If you want to test it, just go up to someone and don't glad hand them, but I go up to Jack and I give Jack a very specific compliment, or John or Sam or Jose or Brenda or Yvonne, and I give them a very specific compliment. Then I watch how they react. I hope they say thank you. Now, what they will likely say is, oh, it's nothing. No, it is something. Oh, anyone could do it. No, you did it. I can do better. Just say thank you. So I think my one message is filter in the positive and be kind to yourself. Number 2, be patient with yourself. I get asked questions about, when does it all come together? I don't know. I can tell you when it came together for Colonel Sanders, he was 65 when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken. Don't get hung up on when it's going to come together. There's three components of coming together. Number one is intelligence. There's certain times you just got to be smart enough to do it. Because I know Simon Sinek, and I disagree with him. He'll say, hire for attitude and teach skills. I get hiring for attitude, but you also have to realize not even if you teach skills, some of them don't have this ability to learn the skill. I own two minor league baseball teams. Every player has a great attitude. The ones that will not make the majors, it has nothing to do with attitude. So we still need to be able to gain the skill. So I think smarts does count. Number two, do I have the experience? It's going to take a while to get good at something. Do I have the experience to get good at it? So experience. And the third one is emotional maturity. And I think emotional maturity, in fact, I'm still searching for it many times, comes last. And that's an ability to not take things personally. That's the ability to be okay if I did the best I could and not beat myself up. That's the maturity, is to not assume and not to generalize, but be specific. So I think if I was graduating from college, I would be kind to myself. I would be patient with myself, and I would let the positives in and not just let the negatives in. So now we go to leadership. To lead change, what is the most important soft skill? To quit using the word soft skill. I hate that word. I absolutely think it's the most ridiculous term I've ever heard to describe difficult, vital, essential skills. Now, I understand it came from the military years ago, but when do we stop this crud? When we call them soft skills, we almost parlay they're not as important or vital as hard skills. So I think what people call soft skills, which many times are people skills, are the hardest skills. It's not a software or a revenue cycle or figuring out a formula. Those are, I would think those are easier. So I think, first of all, you've got to erase from your mind that these are soft skills. Because when you think they're soft skills, you might think they're optional. If you want to be a leader, you've got to have great human skills. You've got to be able to understand how to gain followers, because you can't be a leader if you don't have followers. Now, there's two types of followers: those that report to you, that should follow you, but still might not. But more importantly, if you really want to be a leader, you get people to follow you that don't need to follow you. They follow you because of the direction that you're helping them move in. So, for example, in the city of Pensacola, I went through a huge referendum to build a stadium. And I had to gain a lot of followers to go out and vote to build a stadium. And I had to use different approaches. The key approach was, what's in it for you? You get your kids back home, your grandkids. So it's all about people. And what's the key is, how do you get people to follow you? So number one is, as Tony said, people tend to follow these techniques, and I've done a lot of research. They follow people that are willing to work shoulder to shoulder with them, are willing to get their hands dirty, as you would say. They follow a leader who doesn't ask them to do anything they wouldn't do, because role modeling is really, really important. So I think they also follow a leader who they feel cares about them as a human being. And those are some of the follower techniques. Here's some other quick ones. You have to help people understand, why should they follow you? So, for example, why? What's the benefit? In healthcare, the benefit I try to do is better clinical outcomes for the patients. And if I can show somebody that by doing this behavior, we have better clinical outcomes for the patient, we win. In our companies, we spend a lot of time with why. Why is it important to have good customer service in a coffee shop? Why is it important to have good fan experience at a baseball stadium? So as a leader, I need to help people get compliant. And I'm going to go real quick with these. Number one is, I have to explain why. Number two, I have to make sure that I measure the skills. What skills are going to be needed for us to perform? Because I assume people are trying to do a good job. They're not coming and saying, I hope I fail this class. I hope I bomb on this paper. So what skills are they going to need to achieve the desired outcome we're trying to achieve? Next, how long is it going to take? And I have to look at individuals. People are individuals. Some people are going to learn with verbal instruction, some with written instruction, but mainly I've got to give them a place to get the repetition, because it comes down to repetition. And we don't like something, we of course don't like to do it. I have to identify with the group, what are barriers to you being successful? What are barriers to pulling this off? Then I have to say, do you have the tools that you need to be successful? And then I have to recognize and reward those first movers. And I'll probably get 90% of the people there in a workplace. Then for the 10 that are not moving, I need to meet with them and say, what's keeping you from moving? Because if you don't move, you're not going to be able to work here anymore. You're not going to be able to be here anymore. So I think the key thing of leadership is to really figure out how to get people to do what you want them to do, but truly do it because they want to do it, not because they have to do it. Though I will go to have to. I will go to have to, because sometimes I have to get the people to do the behavior so they get the outcomes. So I will make things mandatory. If you say something's mandatory, there's a 93% chance people will do it. If you say recommended, there's a 60% chance. If you say suggested, a 20% chance. So I am not afraid of the term mandatory at all. In fact, there's many things, if you work for me, that are absolutely mandatory behavior. What in my opinion is crucial to creating change in a learning mindset and innovative culture? Get the basics right. We're so into innovation when we're not even doing the basics right. So I'm big in innovation, but a lot of times we're innovating on stuff that shouldn't be innovated on because we just can't do the basics. So the first thing I always ask is, are we implementing the best practice always? Not usually, not sometimes, but always. Now, if we're doing the best practice always and we're not achieving the needed outcome, now let's look at what innovation do we need to bring to the table. But I'm not a big believer you innovate to innovate. You innovate if you're not achieving the desired outcomes. So let's talk about innovation in healthcare. Let's talk about innovation in our shops. When the pandemic came, we went to curbside service. Okay, so we were forced to innovate based on the practice we were using was not going to be successful because we couldn't have customers inside our stores. When we looked at healthcare, we moved to telemedicine. Now, we've been talking and yakking about telemedicine for 20 years, and we thought it was going to be so hard to do. And then when we had to do it within 90 days, most places had telemedicine. Why? Because the basics were not getting us the outcomes, so we had to move to innovation. The other thing is to always learn from other industries. Many times the innovation comes from outside the industry because somebody has to do it. Look at Purdue University when they bought DeVry. Remember DeVry? They bought this online educational platform and people were ready to fire Daniels, the president of Purdue. How dare he do this? And now they're one of the more successful places in the world because he figured out they couldn't achieve the desired outcomes if they didn't change how they provided some of the educational platform they were doing. Thought I'd at least throw one controversial issue here. How is healthcare important in improving the community? It's the same as education. It's, do people have access? And if people have access, they can save a life. I think it's important. In the Pensacola News Journal this morning, there was an article on an 82-year-old judge named Roger Vincent. I've known Roger for about 10 years. He's an incredible human being. He's made our community so much better personally. I had no idea that 20 years ago, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Now, the story was on that he's terminal now. But you know what I thought? In healthcare, they've kept this man alive for the last 20 years. And look at the impact he has had. So I think healthcare is important because it saves lives. Healthcare is important because it reduces anxiety. Healthcare is important because it can reduce disparity in healthcare. That's why I go back to build a brain, build a life, build a community. As a leader, what are your guiding principles for your organization, and how are people expected to work together? No drama. I don't like drama. I mean, let's all work together. And if you want to bring drama into the organization, go find a soap opera you can have a part in, because I don't like drama. And I think so. Here are some key things. Number one is clarity of expectations. The Heath brothers and their work on Switch, and I brought them to Pensacola too, talk about clarity. 80% of failures, clarity. So do we have clarity of goals? Number two, do we have clarity of standards of behavior? Number three, do we have clarity of training and development? So I think it's really important when I look at guiding principles is clarity is number one, and investing in your people is number two. And unfortunately, many times in organizations, we don't invest in our people. We talk a big game, but we don't do it. So for example, leadership. I'm a big believer in that we've got to invest. Just last week, we spent 2 days working on our company, not in our company. If you want to read a great book on entrepreneurship, read the book E-Myth Revisited by Gerber. It's like 20-something years old. It's the best book I've read on entrepreneurship. Why? It's simple. People that really understand something make it simple. They don't make it more difficult. So he made it simple. And he said, one of the problems is we work so busy working in our business, we don't work on our business. So we spent a whole day last week updating our standard operating procedures. We spent another day role-playing various best practices in our organization, like how to hand off from one person to another person. So for example, Yvonne, if you come to the front office of the Blue Wahoos and you ask about season tickets, I should say to you, let me introduce you to JP Stanzel, our ticket manager. Do you know he's got a bachelor's and master's from the University of Arkansas? Do you know that he actually did his internship here at the Blue Wahoos? He is very experienced in helping people get season tickets. We get great feedback on JP. Let me introduce you to JP. That's how you introduce where they're going, not let me take you down to ticketing. We practice that. So I think training and development, investing in people is more than just talking about it. It's spending the time and resources to do it. So my guiding principles are clarity, investing in people, and making sure that we're holding people accountable for the standards of performance and rewarding and recognizing the heck out of them for why they're doing it. And if they're not meeting expectations, let's talk about what's holding them back. And it could be they shouldn't be here anymore. There are certain times they just shouldn't be, but most of the time we can figure out the right solution. My most popular part of any book I've ever written is in Hardwiring Excellence. It's called High, Middle, Low. How to re-recruit your high performers, how to develop your middle performers and re-recruit them, and how to either move your low performers up or out of the organization. Probably the most popular chapter of any book I've ever written. How do you adapt your leadership style across different settings while maintaining your core beliefs? It depends on your core beliefs. My core belief goes back to my goals, my job as a special education teacher, which is our goal is to maximize human potential. So that's my core belief. Now that means I need to be flexible at times with the environment because people are different. I'm a different leader today than I was before. I have more empathy today. I take more time trying to understand where people are coming from. We do a lot of tests here. We do something called managing by strengths. We just hired a brand new employee named Courtney Price. I know that she's a yellow. That means she's highly, highly structured. That means when I work with her, I have to understand she needs structure. So I can't just verbally throw a bunch of stuff out. I'll overwhelm her. So I need to understand individual attention. One of the great things is watching baseball. The managers that manage in professional baseball treat players as individuals. They don't treat them all the same. They treat them all fairly, but they treat them as individuals. Some people need different things and so on. So I think you're always adapting your leadership style, But your core beliefs are your core beliefs. My belief is our job is to maximize people's human potential. And when you do that, you talk about what training do they need, what skills do they need, what feedback do they need, how do you create a feedback-rich environment? Is diversity possible in Chester and for a small minority business? I think diversity is always, but you have to expand the word diversity. I think it's age, it's sex, it's all sorts of things. But you've got to have purposeful diversity. So if you read my book, Building a Vibrant Community, we created something called Covenant for the Community. It meant when you did a local project, you had to basically agree to 70% of all labor dollars would go to people that live in our county. When you do that, you diversify and build small businesses, because the only way you hit that 70% is to train and develop small businesses. That also addresses the minority situation. So for example, on a building like Southtown, which is an apartment building here, a $52 million apartment building, about 50% of that went to labor, and over 11 million of it went to Black local residents. That would have never happened without the Covenant for the Community. So it just doesn't happen. You have to be very purposeful. So I'd encourage any of you to get the book, Building a Vibrant Community. By the way, every dollar goes to early brain development when that book is purchased, just so you know. So let's move into healthcare in the last 3 or 4 minutes here. How different is process improvement in healthcare versus manufacturing? I don't think it is. I think we just love to be unique. We love to think our whatever profession it is, we're terminally unique. You got customers and you got employees. Manufacturing can kill people just like healthcare can kill people. So I think it's taken time to truly learn process improvement. But process improvement, I think for many years, whether it's Lean or Six Sigma or Baldrige, people have left out, it's a people component. You've got to drive the people component. Because if you have the right process, but you have too much turnover, you will not be able to execute that process correctly because you have too many new people. So I think you've always got to build a people component into everything we do. So I don't think it's all that different. I don't think baseball is any different than healthcare. It all looks the same to me. It all sort of works. What can professors do to incorporate more information to students about improving the healthcare process as they go into medicine? I think it's really getting the basics down. How do you hire people? How do you onboard people? 27% of people that quit their job in healthcare quit within the first 6 months. So how do we hire and how do we onboard? 50% of people that leave will quit within the first year. So how do we retain people for 1 year? If I get them for 5 years, they're with me probably for the rest of their duration. So it's really breaking down the analytics and talking about talent. You know, it's no different than Jim Collins. You get the right people. You get the who and the what sort of takes care of itself. For many years, from your many years of experience, what do you identify as the gap in education of healthcare leaders? People. People. Same thing with doctors, same thing with everyone else. I don't care if you're in charge of accounting, you're still got people. And if you figure out the people component, you can figure out the rest of the component. And you can be yourself. You don't have to change. You can be yourself, but you got to tell them why. We hired many people that are what we call introverts. And when they went to an organization, they get feedback. Well, they don't seem as passionate. They're deeply passionate. They just hold it inside. So what we always had them do is introduce themselves and tell the people why they're in healthcare. And that took care of it. We have to understand. So here's a great quick tool, my book, The Calling, Replenishment. Have, wherever you go, next time have people separate, particularly in the workplace. I know we have students here, and break them down into small groups and have them talk about why they do what they do. So if I was at Widener University, I'd have every faculty member share with 4 or 5 other faculty members, why are you in education? You're not here forced. It's not a forced labor camp here at Widener. Why are you in education? Explain it. Tell the story. And then why Widener? And the second question is what gets them. All of a sudden, people start sharing positive stuff they haven't shared. That's just one replenishment tool that just creates magic in an organization. people have to know what drives people, but then we're all here. And why are we here? It changes the whole situation. How are healthcare providers engaging in digital transformation? I think you always are forced, but I think people really are getting digital transformation pretty well. For example, I was getting my own personal healthcare at Vanderbilt this week. And man, I came home and I'm getting information from them. I'm getting knowledge from them, but you've got to personalize digital information. And you can personalize it. I'll finish with this. I was taking my wife out to dinner for her birthday, and I went online and made the reservations. I got a nice note back and said, "Is this a special occasion?" I said, "Yes, it's my wife's birthday." And they said, "What's your wife's name?" And I put Rishi. And do you know when we went to that restaurant, they put a menu in front of us that said, "Happy birthday, Rishi." They made digital more human than some places have made human. So we're always going to balance between digital and human, but I'm very excited about what we can do in healthcare, because I think the beauty about digital, it creates access. In fact, I drove to Nashville this week. It was 6 hours and 34 minutes. Do you know my doctor said, if you want to, we can do a televisit? So I could have done that, but I did choose to go in person. So that's it. And it's about time to wrap up. So that's
Quint,
I'll be in here.
yeah, thank you. Do you have time for two questions? Two audience members. I asked them to they had questions. I think we have time for it. Anthony, our friend Anthony Stanowski, our mutual friend Anthony has a question, and then one of our associate deans actually has a question as well. I think we have time for. So Anthony.
Thanks, Tony. Quint, you did a great job kind of understanding why people should go into healthcare and kind of describing that whole process about it. We've got several great faculty members on the call today, Doctors Proenza, Young, Antonucci, all have kind of taught in the healthcare management program. What can we do to better prepare people to go into the healthcare field?
I'm a big believer they got to work in it. So I get so many people come up to me and they say, "I'm getting a master's in healthcare administration, blah, blah, blah." And I say, then get a job pushing charts, get a job pushing wheelchairs. I don't care if you volunteer to it. You've got to get into the bowels of an organization and get the experience. Because first of all, you're going to understand healthcare a lot better. And you're going to see it from the patient perspective and the employee perspective. Number two, you're going to have credibility. When you go into, whether it's a residency or an internship, they want to know you get it. They want to know you understand it. And if I just say, well, I've got a master's in this, yippee-yi-yay, what does that mean? That wears off in about 10 days. One of my friends is Buck Showalter. He's now the manager of the New York Mets. And I asked him when I said, "Buck, you never played in the major leagues. How much does that hurt you?" He said, "It hurts me for about 4 practices. Then they could care less." The question is, do you get it? So I think it's getting hands-on practical experience in an organization that's not in the C-suite. It doesn't mean an internship in the C-suite. It means in the lab, be a phlebotomist. It means be a transporter. It means do something where you understand. I get a lot of credibility in healthcare because I rose up through the ranks. And my alcoholism got me in behavioral medicine, and I rose up through the ranks. And even today, people say, "You've been there, you understand it, you've been on the units."
And our associate dean, Dr. Jose Proenza, has a question.
Quint, thanks for sharing your insights with us. I had a question about virtual care. It seems like it's grown quite a bit to enable access during the pandemic. But my question is it doing more? Right. So, for example, do you find it's promoting a more holistic approach to care, or reducing fragmentation, or improving transparency? Has it gone beyond just being an access kind of thing?
I think it will be. I think we're still learning, and you're probably know more about this than me, but I think it depends on the skill set of the provider. And one of the things I think people are still learning is how to be better at it. For example, Jose, this is me. Some of the early stuff that came out on telehealth I thought was wrong. It told doctors, look into the camera. No, you don't have to look into the camera the whole time. When I go to my doctor, I just went to my doctor at Vanderbilt. They didn't look at me the whole time. They looked at my chart, they pulled up stuff. So I think it's that type of feedback that I think it's really learning how to get used to it. But I do think besides accessibility, I think it's comfort. So for example, a good friend of mine's wife has rheumatoid arthritis. And when the pandemic came, she'd always gone to the personally. And the doctor said, we're going to do this telehealth. She didn't want to do it. Then she did it. She looked at her husband. She said, I will never go to his office again the rest of my life. So I think we're all learning. I think but I think it really makes it easier to share information, to pull information up. But I still like in person, but that's my age. I still like reading a print copy of a newspaper too. So it shows you how old I am. I just think, Jose, we're still learning. But I think the players that'll teach us are the innovators. And the challenge we have, Jose, in healthcare is we have so much bricks and mortar to support that we're going to be less likely to be innovative than somebody who's not carrying the bricks and mortar. But look at what we're doing with home care, hospital care in the home now. So we're going to be forced to do it. But as you know, Jose, it all comes down to reimbursement. Where's the dollars? And if the dollars support telemedicine, you'll see a lot of telemedicine. If they don't, you won't.
So before we wrap up, and again, thank Quint for his time, I want to thank a couple people. Jessica Delaney, who runs our advising center. She helped organize this event. So Jessica, thank you so much. Evan Davis is one of our graduate students. He's been helping us control the Zoom today. Evan, thank you so much. Quint, I also want to thank your assistant, Barbara Payne. She's been instrumental in the multiple meetings we've had with her. So Barbara, thank you for all of your help. We're going to wrap it up here. Again, any students who are interested, we have a couple of copies left of some of Quint's books. If you're interested in stopping by the dean's office, we'd love to see you and say hi and give you some copies of the books that Quint has referenced today. As you can tell, he's inspirational, but he has so much knowledge and his books are great reads. And I think you'll enjoy them. So Quint, thank you again for your time. It's really been an honor and a pleasure to have someone like you speak with us and to really humanize leadership. And myself as a former, current, I hope still a human resource management professor, of course, I always love hearing you lead with people because that's what I teach. So thank you to everyone, Quint and Barbara and Evan and Jess, if you don't mind hanging on the Zoom, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, a few things, Tony, real quick. Yeah. Barbara Scott put my email in there, quint@quintstuder.com. You can also learn how to sign up so you get a column for nothing every week. This column coming up is on compliance. And then also LinkedIn. That's probably the preferable way if you want to also get in touch with me and follow some of the things and so on. So appreciate it. And any opportunity I can have, let me know.
Great. Thank you. And that'll wrap up our talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mike, if you want to hang as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.